So I wanted to ask a bit more of a fun question.
Okay.
For all of the cooler people around. What's the coolest asset that we've ever lent against, in your view?
Well, look, we've arranged finance against some incredible properties around the world. So kind of incredible villas in the south of France, Barbados and St Bart's, the ski chalets in Gstaad and so on, and some of the most striking trophy homes in London. So I think that's quite cool.
Very cool.
Okay. Yeah. We've also, what else can we go through? We've done sports cars, so Rolls Royces and Ferraris and Hurricanes and all those type of things. Yeah. It's less usual, and there's got to be a specific reason for borrowing against a sports car, so that happens. During the pandemic, we had lots of people emerge that needed liquidity and had assets. Yeah. So their business might have reduced in its output. They wanted to preserve cash, so they used all sorts of different assets to raise money. We were asked to do a loan against a unbelievable collection of Patek watches and Rolexes and so on, which was kind of running up to £10 million. The guy was super wealthy, had incredible businesses, lots of property around the world, but just needed cash. So we decided that the watches were the things to use, instead of going through the refinance, and his business performance had tailed off as a result of the pandemic, and raising money against those assets, which are exploding in value, is better than selling them to raise the money. We also arranged some finance which ended up not being used against some cognac, which was uncovered in a family basement, and they wanted to raise some money against this hoard of very, very, very rare cognac to build a business. So that was quite fun. And then, of course, like boats and planes.
Yeah,
and
all the usual jazz. Yeah,
yeah,
for us anyway.
Well, exactly.
Well, I think, that showcases how Enness, we're much more creative when it comes to financial situations and solutions for our clients, which, a lot of these people, as you know, and I know, seeing them on a daily basis, they're creative individuals themselves, which brings us on to actually...
Well, I think that's the point, and exactly the point of what we're trying to do. That individual who you're talking about, the business owner, the entrepreneur, the kind of high-profile, prominent individual, gone are the days that those individuals just live in one country and have one asset and they live in it. Businesses are all over the world. Properties are all over the world. They might be resident here, domiciled here, tax resident here. So that complexity, and we're able to look at all of those assets across international boundaries and borders and come up with the solutions there. So that's exactly that.
Absolutely, and I think that brings me really nicely on to another element that makes us unusual at Enness. Most debt specialists... Unique.
Not unusual.
Are quite transactional. However, we place a heavy emphasis on relationships. Obviously, that's a part of the company I'm heavily involved in. And, the customer touch points that we have, I think, are very different to a normal debt specialist.
It's a good point. So, historically, when we started out Enness, people would... it's still quite normal now. People go to their bank to get a mortgage. That's what everyone does. So I want to borrow some money. I call my bank, hey bank, can I borrow some money? And the bank says one of two things, either yes, here's some money, or no, you can't have any money. And it's quite interesting just to follow those two branches. If the bank says yes, that means that the bank's prepared to support you. We work with 500 banks plus all over the world. And I've already said we look at everything in addition to the mortgage on the home, so all of these different ways. So the bank said yes, that means you're good credit, you're a good candidate for credit. But how do you know that bank, that solution is the best one for you?
Exactly.
And how do you know that approach of taking the mortgage against the property is the right one? So when we started Enness, people would go to their bank would say yes, they take the mortgage, cool. Or the bank says no. And if the bank says no, there's a reason for that. And the reasons are usually really subjective, or just you've asked a question of a bank that isn't able to do that thing. It doesn't mean that you can't have the mortgage. So we used to be in a position of that solving the problem. Islay, my bank said no because I'm self-employed, because I'm from overseas, because I don't show an income, because of this, because of that. Can you help me? So our historical position was helping people that have been turned down by their bank, so a second line. That's now, where the company's 15 years old, and we've gone through so many revolutions of those customers that they come to us with a problem, we solve the problem, and we set them on the way. And then the next time they just come back to us because we make it easy. We cut out all the nonsense. We don't insist on endless meetings. No. We do the paperwork when it's meant to be done, not at the beginning. And we actually advise the customer of the best way forward. And most crucially at the moment in this competitive marketplace, we execute the mortgage. So what I mean by that is it's easy to find a mortgage and an interest rate. It's really difficult to get that mortgage delivered. Moving parts, information, time lags, lots of different people involved. So one of our biggest contributions is delivering the mortgage and the plan so that everything else happens after that. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
What was your question?
Well, how we add value with relationships and touch points, but obviously, getting the deal done, but making sure they know at the end of the phone at every second is something we very much do.
So those touch points then, to actually answer your question, Alex, is we engage in that first transaction. We've got an international team of people that look after the customers, and we've got a central function, which you're a significant part of, that stays in touch with people. So we call up and we check in and we ask what's going on, and we offer updates on what's available, and we invest our time in getting to know who the customer is. So when new bank comes along or new idea comes along, we can show that to the customer. Or also the customer can just call us or email us or WhatsApp or all the other things and just say, is this possible? Can I do this? And often it's, you can do that. This is how we do it. Or instead of that classic computer says no thing, it's you can't do that, but if you do this, or if you bring this in, or you wait for a period of time, or you add some more security, you can do it. So instead of showing the only thing that's possible, we show all the other options.
And I think that answers the question really well. I mean, that open dialogue we have with our clients is absolutely key, and I find that on a daily basis.
You're trying to make this about you, aren't you?
No, not at all. But going forward on that, especially in relation to COVID, how are you, in your view, seeing the financial landscape change?
What happened, so during COVID, we thought that during COVID, it would be a repeat of the financial crisis, and that's where we started the business. So we thought the shutters would come down, the doors would shut, the bolts would go across, and the banks would stop lending. That's the kind of typical expectation in periods of economic crisis, which the pandemic was a period of economic crisis. But the opposite happened this time. Banks were encouraged to lend, capitalised. All the governments around the world increased liquidity, which means there's more money in the system, which means the banks are more capitalised, which means they lend. And the banks do want to lend. It is one of the primary functions of most of the banks. It's more difficult, or this market in particular, not really a pandemic reason, but the lending market is so unbelievably fragmented. How many banks does the average person know? Do you know, the ones that exist on the high street, and maybe some big name ones that seem kind of inaccessible. But there's an unbelievable number of credit options. So the mortgage market, in your retail mortgage, let's say there's 120 banks. The high street, the main clearers, the challenger banks, the specialist lenders, the non-bank lenders, and so on. Securities finance, 50 lenders, 50, 60 lenders. Bridging finance, I don't know, 200, 300, because there's no barriers to entry. The international lenders, so those banks that only exist in Switzerland or Luxembourg or Sweden or Norway or South America that we access into as well. And then all of the private funds and the hedge funds and the private equity providers. So I guess that's not specifically pandemic driven, but driven of the functions of the lending landscape in that there's just been this explosion.